I've always loved doing things for other people, and I always felt like public service was where I always wanted to be. But obviously, I had injuries that eventually ended my career. But I wouldn't take anything back for anything.
I do not know you, but I am your brother.
You do not know me, but I am your protector.
I will run into a burning building to save your life.
Though I do not know your name, I will take a bullet for you.
Though we've never met,
I believe in duty
and sacrifice of self.
Your family is my family.
Is my family. Your life is my duty.
What's going on, guys? Time for another episode of Behind the Uniforms. For those of you who have never seen the series before, the way that it works is this. We invite veterans, active military, law enforcement, first responders onto the show. They bring a bottle of whiskey for the whiskey wall. We share a cocktail. They tell us about a good day and about a bad day. We keep an empty glass and an empty seat and a bottle of bourbon here in honor of the men and women who paid the ultimate sacrifice, who will unfortunately never be able to come tell their stories. So that's sort of our tribute. Why don't you tell everyone who you are?
My name is Robert Kaminski. I'm from a little town called Lafayette, Kentucky.
Lafayette? I thought it was Lafayette. No? Have we been saying it wrong?
Well,
the whole
if
time?
you say Lafayette down there, they know you're not from that town. And I live right near the ranges for Fort Campbell, so it gets pretty loud, especially at 3 in the morning when it shakes your house.
Awesome. Well, first, I want to give a little shout out to Connecticut River Valley Inn was kind enough to put you up. These guys are incredible. They're out in Glastonbury, Connecticut, and they said any wounded warriors or law enforcement who come up, we want to make sure to put them up when they're on the show. So big shout out to them. But what'd you bring for the whiskey wall, first of all?
Patent Armored Diesel. There's only one place I can find it, in Oak Grove, Kentucky, and it's actually a lot smoother than it sounds. It sounds pretty harsh, but it's actually pretty decent.
Well, we'll pretend that it's not 9:47 in the morning right now.
Yeah,
First,
okay.
a toast to you, brother. Why don't we start with your background? Tell everybody a little bit about your story.
Well, I was in the military for 14 years, between active duty and National Guard, and then I was police officer for almost 10 years. And it was a good, I've always loved doing things for other people, and I always felt like public service was where I always wanted to be. But obviously I had injuries that eventually ended my career, but I wouldn't take anything back for anything.
Where do you want to start? You want to start with a good day or a bad day?
Well, we can start with what happened that ended my career pretty much. I had a back injury in Iraq, and because I got activated after I got active duty and deployed for 18 months. When I got back, I wasn't even back a year, and gotten into a vehicle pursuit. A woman had 5 felony warrants, and we chased her from Kentucky all the way into Tennessee, and they'd given us permission to continue with the pursuit. And we got to exit 1 in Clarksville, and her vehicle spun out, and I was thinking we were done, so I pulled my vehicle up in front. She started ramming the driver's side of my car, and when I got out, I had drawn my weapon, and I looked at her, and she looked at me, and even in Iraq, I don't think I ever looked into the eyes of somebody that just, it was almost like looking in the eyes of Satan. I knew what she was going to do, and I knew what was going to happen. And then I had made that decision on what I was going to do, and when I saw the kids in the back seat, I froze.
Oh, jeez.
She, it was just like a light switch. It just, I knew what I was going to do, and then it just stopped. So she hit me, and I hobbled back in my car and tried to re-engage, even though the side of my car was pretty messed up. And she wound up hitting a fire hydrant, and that ended the pursuit. And she got taken into custody. And once that adrenaline started to wear off,
Then the injury set in.
that's when I realized I was hurt. And they took me by ambulance to the hospital. And of course, my wife was at home, and the chief of police and my captain came to my house. And if you're the spouse of a soldier or police officer or EMT and you see that,
You think it's over.
And mind you, I'm in the hospital. They brought her to the hospital, and I'm laying there in this bed. They've got most of my uniform off me. They got me medicated beyond belief, and I'm like drooling on myself. And my wife comes in, and she's just yelling at me like, "If you ever do this again, I'm gonna kill you myself." And I'm crying at this point, going, "Yes, dear, I'm so sorry. I won't do it again." And I'm the one that got hit by the car. And it's like, I didn't think about that at that time. All I knew is that, I didn't want her to be upset. And, I managed to keep going. I did physical therapy, and I managed to keep working for a few more years. And it got to the point where I just, physically, I couldn't do it anymore. And I had to call it, because I didn't want to get somebody else hurt or myself hurt if I couldn't carry my own weight.
Sure.
And I wound up in a wheelchair for almost 3 years on and off. And my wife was my caregiver, and VA, I'll give it to this, and the Disabled American Veterans, which I really appreciate. If it wasn't for those two organizations, well, that organization and my wife, I really don't think I'd be here today. Because, when you lose your independence, you feel like a burden, and I didn't want to live. And I actually did sit there a couple of nights in my wheelchair with a pistol and considered it. But my wife, she was just outstanding. And the DAV, they did my claim with the VA, and because I didn't know how I was going to pay my bills or keep going. And so I do service work now, doing claims for veterans' disability. And as long as I can, I'm going to do as much to help that organization, because they help me. And I don't want to, I don't know how to put it. I just don't want to sit and do nothing anymore, because, I do overdo it now that I had surgery and may have some metal in me. But it changed my life, and I haven't used my wheelchair since, but I do keep it as a reminder. So whenever my ego gets a little too big, I can drop myself down a little.
Sure. Let me ask you this. All of the people who are struggling right now, who right in this moment are where you were just a couple of years ago, what message can you share with them?
I know it sounds stupid, not stupid, but cliche, don't give up. But there's others out there, and you're not alone. And that was the thing. I felt like I was alone. But through the DAV, I met a lot of people. In fact, our previous national commander last year was a quadruple amputee.
Wow.
I never seen a man with no limbs pull a cigarette out of a pack and light it. And I thought to myself, I was like, how long did it take for him to learn how to do that?
Sure.
and I thought about it, and it helped me to put my life in perspective as well, because I'd had my surgery and I was trying to make sure that I could get to where I'm at now. And it just, you think about it and you're like, it had to have taken a while.
Sure.
To learn how to do that and get used to using those things. And he was just a big motivation for me too. So
We're your second stop too, right?
Yes.
So tell everyone where you were before this.
I was in Washington, D.C. DAV, we had our midwinter conference, and that's when all the states go there, and each delegation from each state goes, meets their representatives, the congressmen and senators, and we do our lobbying for the DAV to help push the policy goals and veterans legislation. And then our national commander goes before the Joint Veterans Affairs Committee and testifies on what we'd like to see done. And it was pretty productive this year. I enjoy doing it. It does take a lot out of me emotionally and physically, because I obviously have my own issues. But it was worthwhile. We got some commitments to help improve the caregiver program, because right now only spouses of post 9/11 veterans are eligible for it, and we're trying to get it where veterans of all eras, their spouses, can be eligible for it. Because if my wife hadn't been able to take care of me, like I said, I don't think I'd be here, especially if I'd have been institutionalized. And it took a lot out of her, a lot. And I didn't realize how much until I took her to my therapy appointments. And I learned a lot about myself, and I realized it's not about me. And that was the mentality I'd gotten into, is that it was all about me because of my situation, and I didn't realize how much it was taking a toll on her. So it's something that the caregiver program is something that's I'm passionate about, because my wife was my caregiver, and if these guys who, especially guys who are Vietnam veterans, a lot of them have diabetes related to Agent Orange and other illnesses, and a lot of times with diabetes, you may have to go to an amputation, and that's a catastrophic injury, and you don't want to put them in an institution or a nursing home, because that's just going to make the situation even worse. Right. And it's going to cost the government a lot more money to institutionalize a veteran than it would be to have their spouse take care of them or their family take care of them. And that's why that program was initiated, and I'm a big advocate for that program.
One of the things that has been always fascinating and inspiring to me about men like you and women who have done the same is that you didn't just decide one day, I'm going to become a police officer. You had a backstory of service, and we touched on it a little bit, but one of your first experiences overseas, I don't know if you're willing to talk about this or not, we talked about it a little off camera, one of your first experiences wasn't exactly a warm welcome to Iraq, right?
Yeah.
And then somewhere in your mind you were like, okay, well, I made it, I lived, I'm going to keep putting my life on the line for complete strangers. Do you want to share with them that story? Is that cool?
Well, we had convoyed up from Kuwait and made it through Baghdad without a problem. And of course, you're going through Baghdad and what they called IED Alley, and you could see the big holes in the ground. Made it through there fine, and we got into AO Caldwell and met up with another convoy picking us up, and the convoy leader got on the radio and said, welcome to AO Caldwell, it's a relatively safe place. And about a minute later, the convoy got hit with an IED.
Jeez.
And I did kind of want to slap him a little, but it is what it is.
Why do you think so many people, yourself included, left the military, and instead of saying, I made it home alive, I'm going to, try and reacclimate to civilian life and find a regular, by all metrics, normal job.
Yeah.
Not as an insult to law enforcement, just the opposite. Instead decided to continue a life of service.
There were, I don't know how to put it, in law enforcement, there's a lot of bad because nobody calls the police because they want you to come over and have tea and cookies or whatnot.
Right.
But there are times, good times, and if you can save a life, that makes all the bad stuff that happened before that worthwhile. Sometimes it's an emotionally taxing job, and I know a lot of guys that are in that line of work that are prior military and in law enforcement, and I talk to them, and it does take a toll. I don't think there is a first responder, military, at some point in your career, you're going to see something that sticks with you. And so PTSD gets a big stigma associated with it. And for the most part, veterans are not a danger to others. They're more of a danger to themselves when it comes to PTSD. But you've got these people out there that think that if you have PTSD, you're just going to go out there and shoot up a bunch of people.
Right.
And that's not the case. But
you want to tell me about a good day?
Well, I did get a call one time, and it was, a medical call, and I got there, and what had happened is the guy was in a motorcycle accident on the interstate and laid down his bike. Well, he left his bike there and went home. His friends took him home, and he went to get in the shower and went into shock. So I was the first one there, and he was choking on his tongue. So I managed to hold his airway open until EMS got there and could intubate. And it, the medics, said I did a good job. And it felt good to know that, because if he'd kept choking, he'd have been dead before EMS got there. Because they got there a couple minutes after me, and that felt validating. And I'm not saying that I'm some sort of hero or not. It's just that
You were to him?
Yeah, and it made a difference to know that I was there and I was able to do something, and it felt good to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong, on some of the bad days, my wife knew. She knew when I come home that I'd had a bad day, especially if I didn't say anything. And I tried to shelter her from some of the things, but obviously some of the things I couldn't keep in, and I had to talk to her about.
I heard a story a few years back. Actually, this was probably when I was a teenager, so a million years ago, it feels like at this point. And I think it's so appropriate when it comes to law enforcement. So there are these two guys walking along a beach, pass each other. One guy sees the other guy, and the other guy's stopping, and he's picking up starfish. And he's throwing them in the ocean. He says, "What are you doing?" And the guy says, "Well, when the tide goes out, all of these starfish are washed up, and if someone doesn't throw them back in the ocean, they're all going to die." So the other guy goes, "Yeah, but there must be millions of starfish washed up along the beaches all over the world every single day. How can you possibly make a difference?" So the guy doesn't say anything. He picks up another. He throws it in the ocean. He goes, "Well, I made a difference to that one, didn't I?" And I think it's just so fitting for law enforcement, because so many people think of heroism and they think it's got to be this big magical thing where you save hundreds of lives. But stories like this happen day in and day out every single day, and the media tends to report on one or two bad apples, and they don't talk about those lives being saved in every single moment of every single day. So I think the starfish story is just totally appropriate for you guys. Well, brother, I am so honored that you came up. I know this was a super long trip, but and again, special shout out to the Connecticut River Valley Inn. Thank you guys so much. Had a nice stay over there.
Yes, very nice, and they were very, very welcoming, and it was very nice to be there. I actually never stayed in a place like that before. I'm used to hotels with 40 grit sandpaper for toilet paper, but
Well, we're gonna throw up some footage just to show people, because again, these guys are doing it. They're a local couple, and it's just the right thing to do. So they're just doing it as a thank you to you guys. So, well, to you, to our law enforcement, to our veterans, to our first responders, cheers. Guys, thank you all for watching. Thank you for hitting the share button. It takes you 2 seconds to share this video. We're extremely appreciative. God bless you all, and God bless America.